am Sue Webley. Welcome to another episode of Inspire. I had a jam today. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Inspire. I'm your host. I am Sue A. Webley, and I am so glad that you are here. I see you coming in. Do me a favor. As you come in, shout out where you are watching from. Shout out where you're watching from. I'm going to get to it in a minute, but you can also go ahead and start shouting out what you're sipping on. I do that every week. Shout out what you're sipping on. I'm so excited for this conversation today on mental health and leadership. And if you know me well enough, some of you may be popping on, know me personally. I don't hide the fact that I navigate, that I'm a little bit challenged, if you will, with anxiety and depression and some attention deficit, which makes things really challenging in my capacity as a leader in community, as a leader in church, and as an entrepreneur, right? And as a student. Oh my goodness, like all of those things are impacted as I navigate this mental health thing, and because it's nearing the end of Mental Health Awareness Month, I felt it was important for us to have this conversation today. I'm so excited about my guest that I'm going to bring on in a minute. But before I do that, I want to make sure that you are connecting with us. Connect, follow, like, and subscribe. We are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on YouTube. But I want to make sure that you are connecting with us across all of our social media platforms. So you can head over to Cara Solutions LLC on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. We're Inspired by Cara on Facebook and Instagram. And you can head over to our websites at www.cara-solutions.com or www.getinspired.live to find out all about Cara Solutions and Inspired. And so before I even go any further, if you're joining us for the very first time, again, welcome. I am many things, but I am also the founder of Cara Solutions, which is a full digital service agency that helps individuals and organizations navigate the virtual space with confidence. And so Inspire, if you just stumbled upon this broadcast, you don't know what the heck it is. Inspire is a live interview style broadcast on a mission to encourage, empower, and embolden individuals to create change in their personal lives, their communities, and in the world. And as our guests, entrepreneurs, influencers, creatives, and others share their testimonies, tips, and tools with us, we hope that you are inspired to elevate your mindset, pursue your dreams, and to do, as the late Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon put it so eloquently, the work your soul must have. The work your soul must have. I see you coming in. So not only are we on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and all those places, we are also on Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. We are on Inspired by Cara on all of those platforms. So if you've missed any previous episodes, you just want to take it with you, you prefer to travel with it, you want to put it in your ear, you want to listen to it in the car, certainly head over to Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on Inspired by Cara. Follow us. Listen, y'all, I'm trying to get my numbers up. Do me a favor, do me a solid, and follow us on those platforms. Let me see who is joining us. I don't know why listen, y'all pray for me on my light, because sometimes it wants to behave, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know what's happening, but as long as y'all can see me, I'm good. I'm good today. But we're gonna get this light situation together. Good morning, Laquita from Texas. I see y'all. Listen, don't be shy. Go ahead and shout out who you are. I see you sneaking on. You can go ahead and shout it out. But what are you sipping on this morning, Laquita? What are you sipping on this morning? Now, y'all know I always have coffee in my cup. I always have coffee in my cup, and I always got something to say through my cup. So today's cup is Fairly and Wonderfully Made. That's today's cup. But I got coffee in it. What is happening? All right, let's take a sip. So what do you have in your cup? Is it water? Is it coffee? Is it tea? Is it apple juice? Orange juice? Is it a smoothie? Like, what you drinking? If it's something stronger, I'm not judging you. But let me know what you're sipping on. You know, it's early Saturday morning. We have to have something in the cup to help some of us get up. I don't take it lightly. Zero sugar, Canada Dry ginger ale. Okay. All right. That's the first time. Yeah, usually you have a little coffee in the cup, but you're just waking up, Nikita. So, okay. Zero sugar, Canada Dry ginger ale. Thank you for sharing that. Y'all should come on. Do me a favor. Share this broadcast today. Listen, it's an important one. It's an important conversation. And if you're in leadership, you know someone who is across any discipline. It doesn't matter whether you're in ministry or whether you're an entrepreneur or you are a business, whether you are in corporate or whatever sector, nonprofit, profit, whatever. If you're a leader in any capacity, this is an important conversation for you. And so I'm not going to belabor the time because I want to make sure that we have enough time to speak really well with our guests, who I'm so excited to have on with us, Dr. Liz DuBois, executive coach and business development consultant, Reverend Olivia Tate, preacher, psychotherapist, and purpose coach, and Dr. Bryant Woodford, licensed professional counselor. And there's so much more than that. I'm going to read up a little bit on them as we prepare to meet them. And so they are going to bring their wealth of experience, expertise, and unique perspectives to the Inspire table as we discuss mental health and leadership. So Dr. Liz DuBois is an executive coach, professional development coach, and co-founder of the Center for the Study of Gender and Conflict. Dr. DuBois' expertise lies in leading organizations and individuals toward unapologetic self-acceptance and empowerment. She draws from a range of conflict resolution frameworks and somatic counseling tools to help her clients address trauma, codependency, and self-worth issues, fostering leaders grounded in self-acceptance and joy. Reverend Olivia Dorsey Tate, affectionately known as Lady O, is a multifaceted empowerment coach, preacher, facilitator, and wellness advisor. Her journey to leadership is rooted in her deep faith, corporate professionalism, and including her pursuit of a Master Divinity with a focus on Black faith and life. She believes that hard work, faith, and unwavering expectations are the keys to unlocking the potential of individuals and organizations. And Dr. Bryant Woodford is a licensed professional counselor, ordained clergy in the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, and founder of Woodford Wellness. With a background in marriage and family therapy and a Master of Divinity, Dr. Bryant bridges the realms of psychology and spirituality. He helps clients not only navigate their mental health challenges, but also reconcile their spirituality with their sexuality, making him a beacon of support for diverse individuals seeking balance and well-being. And so as you can see, together our esteemed guests represent a wide spectrum of experience and expertise. And so throughout our time together today, they're going to shed some light on the critical interplay between mental health and leadership and how understanding this dynamic can empower leaders across various disciplines to thrive. And so as we prepare to meet our guests, let's take a listen to some leadership affirmations. Usually I will pull a video. Usually I will pull a video from one of the guests, but today I thought it appropriate to listen to some I am affirmations that are specifically for leaders.
The words I am are two of the most powerful words in the universe. Whatever you put behind these words ultimately becomes your reality. To all my leaders out there, listen to these affirmations while working, walking, or just sitting in a quiet place for reflection. I am. I am confident and able to handle any obstacle thrown in front of me. My presence is my power. I am superior to negative thoughts and low actions. I treat others with respect and appreciate their individuality. I have the power to create positive change. My ability to conquer my challenges is limitless. My potential to succeed is infinite. I am in the process of becoming the best version of myself. I am grateful to learn from new experiences, even if I struggle. I am focused and persistent. I am proud of myself and all that I have accomplished. I always encourage others towards their dream. I am a born leader. I lead others by setting a positive example. I am a great visionary. I am a thoughtful person and strive to inspire others with my words. I am always generous with praise and compliments. I am an inspiration to others. I bring out the best in people. I have a magnetic personality.
Good morning, all. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me today on Inspire. So, the first question I'm going to ask what are you sipping on? What are you sipping on? Before we get into our discussion, what do you have in your cup, Reverend Olivia?
I am sipping on some peppermint tea with a little honey in it. Get my day started.
Yes. All right. So I love
to celebrate the small victories is what's on my cup.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing. What are you sipping on, Dr. Bryant?
A little homebrew coffee. Don't be deceived by the Starbucks label. It's simply a mug brewed in my kitchen.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Liz?
I have in my very fancy cup that has a mullet sticker on it because it makes my son uncomfortable. I've got some water with lemon. I like to roll up to the baseball practice with my mullet cup. It embarrasses good friend.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing what you are sipping on. We're going to get right into our conversation. So I read just kind of a little bit about each one of you. So can you tell me in your respective fields, and we'll start with Reverend Olivia, how have you observed the intersection of mental health and leadership quality?
So I, as a psychotherapist, as a licensed professional counselor, my target audience is actually professional Black women. And so I typically, most of my clients are women in leadership, Black women specifically in leadership positions. And so one of the key things, in addition to the intersections that you just named, for me is also these factors of how race comes in to the conversation when we talk about, mental health and leadership, right? So we have particularly, again, Black women who are navigating these spaces where they're in leadership over people who have challenges with them being in leadership because of their gender and because of their race, right? And so there's these ways in which, if I'm assertive as a Black woman, now I'm a B. I don't know my language here. And
You're
so,
free. Go ahead.
so now I am the angry Black woman, right? And so, but I've been trained and conditioned to avoid being labeled that. So now I am, towing this line of I've got to do, I've got to lead, I've got, goals that I have to meet, and so on and so forth. And I'm trying to navigate this intersection of all of my identities and show up authentically in this role. So those are, just kind of introductory in terms of the ways in which I see this intersection of leadership and mental health, because it's so much more broader than the one singular situation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Reverend Olivia. Dr. Liz?
Hi. It's so funny because I work with people who straddle this line, right? They're very, very, very high performers, sometimes in the 8-figure club, right? They're making multi-million dollars. They've got confidence out the wazoo, but they're struggling really, really with immense challenges around anxiety. I tend to find that my clients who are dipped into the more depressive side of things, right, they aren't able to perform at the same level, not because they're dumber or they've lost motivation. Simply, depression zaps you of all energy, right? It's not the opposite of happiness; it's the opposite of vitality. And then I live this in my own personal life. I'm bipolar 1. I have, I don't want to say suffered. It's like riding a roller coaster. There are tremendous highs that have played a really big role in my success. And then there are really big lows as an entrepreneur who is a high performer, who feels proud and grateful for the things that I've been able to do in my career. It's been a balance to reconcile that with the stigma that we have in our society, and of course in other cultures as well. Just to use a quick tangible example, when I was pregnant, I was in a mixed state. I'd never experienced that before, and I was very, very concerned that I was going to commit suicide. I was depressed enough to do it, and I was unhinged enough to do it, right? I've been manic before and felt that kind of boundless euphoria, and I'd been depressed before and had ruminated on self-harm. But that combo together felt very scary. But I also was the executive director of an international research center at an R1 university, right? And so I went directly from a lunch meeting with someone very high up in the gender organization within the U.S. Institute of Peace, and drove myself to GW Hospital, where I was met by my doctor, because I was 27 weeks pregnant and I wasn't going to mess around with it. And that kind of cognitive dissonance between I'm a leader and look at me, I've got a PhD and I'm able to play, a meaningful role in the world and helping lift up communities, but also I'm a person that cannot have control over how her brain works at certain points, regardless of my best efforts. So for me, part of my role as someone that leads leaders is helping them reconcile that difference between, sometimes there are things beyond our control, right? That our brains are just wired that way. And that doesn't detract from our power as leaders, and it doesn't detract from the calling that we've been given. So that's where it shows up in my business.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. Dr. Bryant.
I think we've all heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. And then for me, the next part of that is healed people heal people. So I think that how we treat ourselves is a direct reflection of how we treat others. And so the ability to care for one's own mental health and one's own self-care has an impact on how you are as a leader in terms of how you treat and interact those who directly report to you. So I often tell individuals that, one of the things I talk about in therapy, and it seems simple or it sounds perhaps simple, but it's often very challenging to do, is learning to offer yourselves grace and learning to be kind to yourself. And that is sometimes people's therapeutic work, that their traumas, and I don't say trauma with any stigma, has resulted in them being so critical of themselves, and then in turn they project that critique onto others, right? So that same harm that I have been accustomed to, because it is familiar to me, right? That familiarity keeps us in those patterns, because it's not necessarily that it's who I am, but it's what you've done. Our trauma responses aren't who we are, they're what we've done. And so, and because we have gotten accustomed to being heavily critical of ourselves, and then as leaders, we then, impose that critique onto others. And so as you learn, or as individuals learn to offer themselves more grace and kindness, as they manage, they then are more inclined to offer that same grace and kindness to others in their community.
Wow. So that so resonated with me, the offering of grace to oneself, because I'm uber critical of myself, and I'm uber critical of myself, and I sometimes forget to extend that grace to myself. Like, it's okay not to be perfect, right? It's okay not to have it all together. It's okay that you're still learning this. It's okay that you don't get it the first time. Like, I have to remind myself that it's okay not to do what other people have done, not to look at somebody else's success and wish it's like, okay, why aren't I there, right? So I'm uber critical of myself. And so I have to often remind myself to extend grace to myself. And it's easy for me to tell other people to extend grace to themselves.
That's the easy part. But we don't take our own advice oftentimes.
So we sure do not. And I have had, and some of them may be watching right now, but I've had some loved ones kind of repeat my own words back to me, and I get upset because, like, don't use my own words on me. But it's really easy to support, to encourage, to edify, to to help upgird someone else, right? And help guide someone else to towards the path of enlightenment that it is for us to do for ourselves. So
I would even add to that I think that's one of the ways in which we deflect, right? So I'm feeling these things, I'm struggling in this way. I don't necessarily want to draw attention to myself because I'm this leader and I'm this person that everyone is looking up to. So instead of being in this, this state where I'm obviously not well, let me show up as the best version of myself. Let me, walk in smiling and greeting people, and like you said, edifying, and, just being this light. And I think part of it is kind of that cognitive dissonance that Dr. Liz even mentioned earlier, is that, there's this struggle between, or this argument, this internal conflict between what I'm feeling and what I am showing up as, or what I am portraying for, to others or what have you, which further depletes our energy and depletes, what little bit of energy and motivation we might have to give ourselves grace. We're using that to show up in these spaces as the great leaders that we've been called to be.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I think another part of that is that dissonance and that the internal conflict. I like to name that as dishonesty.
Absolutely.
This notion of I have to be strong for others, that's deception. And I know that's difficult for us to process and ingest, but that is the reality. If I am not well and I am attempting to portray wellness externally, then I am deceiving my community and myself, right? And none of us can recover and get the help that we need if we are not honest about our lived experience.
Yeah. Is it okay if I jump on top?
Yes.
No, let's jump.
I so appreciate that, Dr. Bryant, because is it okay, Dr. Bryant or Dr. Woodward? Which do you prefer?
That's fine. Yes. That's fine.
So I love what I want to weave together what you said about self-compassion and grace and what you just talked about with dishonesty, right? Because I think part of the reason it's really difficult for us to be candid and transparent with ourselves about what we're experiencing, and then of course transparent and candid with our communities, is because we can't extend ourselves that grace, right? Capitalism tells us we have to have it all buttoned up, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to constantly be at our best and hustle and be consistent at all times, or else we're doing something wrong, right? We're not showing up. And then to have these honest conversations, like you said, with ourselves can be very, very scary, right? So that grace plus honesty looks like self-compassion, right? Mm-hmm. What is it that I'm afraid of that I think is going to happen if I allow myself to be honest with myself and others, right? The question that drawing from part psychology, right? The question that I always like to ask myself and encourage clients to ask themselves is, what part of me doesn't feel safe speaking up right now? What part of me doesn't feel safe being honest? What part of me is afraid of being rejected by my community? Or for entrepreneurs who do struggle, you know, with severe mental illnesses, right? What part of me is afraid I'm going to lose my job, right? Am I going to lose my business? Are people going to think less of me? And so that honesty is not just self-deception and not just deceiving our communities or our clients. It is an expression of, I don't feel safe expressing what's really going on because of all the cultural stigma, all of the economic repercussions that might happen if I'm honest.
Jesus.
Y'all just went right on in.
Right.
No warm up. We just gonna go right into it. I love it.
So I apologize in advance if you hear me kind of. I'm recovering from being under the weather last week, so I still have a little cough left. So if you hear me cough, that's what it is. Oh my goodness, this has been so rich already. So we talk about this dishonesty, we talk about not feeling safe to kind of voice things. You know, all of this, you know, this kind of lends to or points to this great stigma that exists surrounding mental health, right? And so this perpetuates the false belief that individuals with mental health conditions are weak, flawed, irresponsible, incapable of being productive leaders. I have believed these things about myself, right? How would each of you respond to this? We would, let's start with Dr. Bryant.
First of all, us having conversations to help destigmatize it is extremely important, right? When we are talking about that work, that destigmatizing, let me just kind of go back for 1 second. This notion of me somehow being flawed or damaged, weak as a result of my mental illness. I think that first, it's important to make a couple of the distinctions between one having mental illness, being diagnosed with mental illness, and then actually treating the mental illness, because they are not the same.
Okay.
They are not the same, because one can have it and never know it officially. One can have a diagnosis and then never get treated.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the actual treatment. So I think those distinctions are important. Yeah. But to even get to a place where one recognizes something isn't quite right, I'm off in some way, or I can't do the things that I'm used to doing, right? That takes self-awareness.
Yeah.
That takes honesty. That takes vulnerability. It takes you have to trust yourself to know that you are experiencing something that is not perhaps what you are accustomed to experiencing. Those are not flaws. Those are all gifts in and of themselves. To be able to pay that much attention to yourself and be honest about your experience, and then to have the courage to go seek help or support, there's nothing flawed about any of those characteristics.
Yeah.
There's nothing flawed about any of it. Those are all giftings. And then you go and you find the support that you need in order to treat whatever the thing is. But I just think it's so important for individuals to be able to know that I'm being authentic and honest and caring for myself by even acknowledging the fact that these things are happening to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is part of the work in and of itself.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Bryant. Anyone else want to respond to that question?
I would. And so again, just kind of repeating that my framework is particularly geared to, cultural sensitivity within the therapeutic space, right? And so what's coming up for me when I hear you talk about, the stigma that surrounds mental health and wellness, I think about like the cultural implications of what getting help means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many of us, people of African American descent grew up in spaces where it was important to maintain secrecy within the house, right?
Yes.
Many of us were told, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And what we don't really talk about is how some of these principles and ways of being were passed on to us from our ancestors as a means of keeping themselves safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our enslaved ancestors didn't know if there was a leak in the building, right? And didn't know who was going to run back and tell the colonizers about their plan to escape. So it was, you teach the children what you hear, what you see, you don't go and share that, So my parents were raised during the time of desegregation, right? So respectability politics was extremely important. I need you to go out this house and I need you to look good. I need you to be dressed your best. I need you to, not say anything, not draw any attention to yourself, because I want you to return home safely. Mm-hmm, so if that means that, you got to take a licking and keep on, whatever it means, get home safely, right? And so there's these layered conversations and principles that were taught to us about survival. And so now we're still in a place where, yes, I have these things going on. Yes, I notice that something is not right. Yes, I am battling these thoughts of harming myself and or others. Yes, I am depressed and can't get out of the bed. Yes, I am experiencing extreme anxiety every time I walk out my house. Yes, I'm experiencing these things, but I dare not talk about what's going on in my house lest something happens, right? And so I'm gonna quote my grandmother in closing. One of the things that she said some years ago is she said, we're so busy talking about what goes on in this house stays in this house. Until we understand that also includes sickness and depression and financial burdens and all of that stays. So until we start opening up some doors and some windows and letting some stuff out, we can't be free.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be free.
Oh my gosh, that was so Dr. Reverend Tate and I pick up where you left off and weave a little bit what Dr. Bryant said. I think there's another layer of this too, which is accessibility of care, right? Dr. Bryant, you kind of outlined different categories, actually treatment. I'm going to add to that accessing care, right? Which of course we know in this community, in this country, like many countries, but in this country that's intersected with race, intersected with poverty, it's intersected with gender. And so when we think about, let's say someone has summoned the courage, they've overcome the different traditions that were passed down for a lot of different safety reasons. Let's say they've overcome all of that internally and said, you know, I'm going to advocate for myself and I'm going to go find services that may or may not exist within communities, right? Especially underserved communities. But even where I lived for 20 years in Washington, D.C., which is saturated with mental health resources, even in those spaces, it's difficult to access them, right? We have with waiting lists. We have psychiatrists who start at $5.75 an hour for a lot of different places. We have people that have 3-month-long wait lists, right? And when you're talking about an acute, episode, we'll say bipolar disorder, perhaps you're somewhere on the schizophrenia spectrum, right? These are things that can't wait. They have to be addressed, right? When we think of, I'm using bipolar disorder specifically just because it's something I have the most familiarity with, right? But if you combine the fatality of breast cancer and the fatality of testicular cancer, bipolar is still higher in fatality than both of those. And so these are very, very serious conditions, as we all know, but the lack of services and availability is so stark, even in communities where there are resources. Ostensibly, you may or may not be able to access them. And then you add on top of that only certain practices take Medicaid, right? Even if they're not on a wait list, finding a practice and part of a clinical practice, our practice does take Medicaid, and it's one of the few in our area that does, right? And so when we think about all these different aspects of interpersonal growth and courage and transcending, generational trauma, we still have systemic barriers that make it difficult for people who have done the work of shifting their mindset. We then run into all these different walls that make it really difficult for us to find treatment and get better.
Yeah. Oh, thank you all so much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of your approaches and how in your practices, how you approach mental health and leadership. And so I'm so grateful for this conversation. I know y'all watching are grateful for it too. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with more conversation with Reverend Olivia, Dr. Bryant, and Dr. Liz. In the meantime, I want to make sure that you are connecting, following, liking, and subscribing. Connect, follow, like, subscribe. Again, we are Cara Solutions LLC on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. We're Inspired by Cara on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cara Solutions, Cara-Solutions. Don't forget the hyphen in the middle. Cara-Solutions.com or www.getinspired.live to learn all about Cara Solutions and also Inspire. We'll invite you again to listen later. To follow us on Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. We're Inspired by Cara on all of those platforms. If you are entrepreneur, influencer, creative, or other individual on a mission like we are to create change while inspiring others to do the same, we want you to be our guest. If you know someone that fits the bill, we want them to be our guest. You can head over to www.getinspired.live to book your appearance today. Go ahead and check out the website and book your appearance today. We want you to join us here on Inspire. We're about to get back. We're about to go back into our conversation. It was a quicker break than usual, but we are there time already, and there's so much more stuff that I want to talk about. So we're getting ready to come back, bring back our guests, Reverend Olivia, Dr. Bryant, and Dr. Liz. So we are back. Thank you again, each of you, for joining me this morning for this important conversation. I have been blessed already. Those of you who are watching, if you have any, I see my daughter on. Hey, Jazz. I love you. I've been blessed already. If any of you who are watching, if you have questions or comments, please post them. If you have questions for the entire group or for one of our guests specifically, post it in the chat and I'll be sure to get it to them before we close out our broadcast today. So Dr. Liz, your approach involves addressing trauma, codependency, and self-worth issues. How Does understanding and healing these underlying causes contribute to more effective leadership?
Great question. So first, I don't think we heal them. I think that we learn to live alongside them. And so the first thing that I do with people is help them just identify where is it that I've internalized this and made it about me, right? And at the intersection of kind of leadership and mental wellness, for a lot of people, their mental illness, right, or their atypical traits have been a boon to them in terms of being able to pursue a lot of the different things that they can pursue, right? And so the first thing that I do with people is help them identify, like, hey, where are the skills of this and what are the kind of liabilities? And how do we come up with tools beyond medication, which I'm a big fan of anyone and everyone getting screened if they think that they're struggling with something, or to all you coaches out there, if you notice something and you're like, oh, that's above my pay grade, it's incumbent upon you to refer somebody out. Period. End of discussion. So first, we kind of do a little bit of diagnostic work there and really see, like, what are the strengths, what are the liabilities, and then with those liabilities, what are the different tools that we're going to use, right? Is it a combination of working with a psychiatrist and doing something like traditional cognitive-based therapy? Are we going to be doing something like EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is much more grounded in somatic techniques, and then working around simple, like, basic principles of coaching, right? Looking at where are the strengths, how do we build off of them, and then within that, those kind of, like, I can see where my strengths are here, and they've internalized some sort of negative perceptions society has placed on them and said, well, you know, I can't because X, Y, and Z. We rework that and we say, well, who's benefiting from that story, right? Because I promise you, it's not you, right? It's like these larger power structures that have yielded a lot of different problematic things, including how you're carrying around this backpack of stories that's making it difficult for you to walk through life in the way that you want. And again, more importantly for entrepreneurs and for leaders, is to have the impact that you want, right? Because no matter what it is that you're going through, powerful story that serves other people, but that has to start, right, like Dr. Bryant said, with a level of honesty and saying, okay, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm struggling with. And I think until we have a level of courage, a level of safety, a level of humility that allows us to drop the mask and say, actually, I am not okay. We can't learn to live alongside the stuff if we're continually stuffing it down, which, by the way, comes out in all sorts of different ways, right? Broken relationships, community violence, inability to sustain income over the long term, problems with your children. Not that the children are problematic, but the relationship and raising your children become very, very difficult. These are not low stakes issues, right? This is not drink more water and go to a yoga class. These are life or death circumstances at a certain point, because if you're not in a space where you might be at risk for suicide, you might have a heart attack because of all of the anxiety that comes with being a leader who's trying to hide what's going on. The burden of that is so heavy. So those are kind of the approaches that I start with, and then it becomes very individualized. Trauma is not relative, right? It's not what you went through is worse and therefore I'm less screwed up, right? Our nervous systems are all carrying these imprints of what happened to us. And so learning to live with what has happened to us, not just in the sense of I've made some peace with it, but I've developed some coping techniques that when I feel triggered and I'm having a reoccurrence emotionally and physically, I know how to take care of myself so this doesn't come out in my business.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Bryant, how do you integrate theology and psychology to support leaders with spiritual and mental health needs?
That's such a rich question. Because, particularly anytime you're talking about theology, like there's so many layers and layers and layers. And it's interesting because my my journey, my career journey and educational journey, I would not have chosen it the way in the order in which I did it. But however, I was just sort of open to God, universe, and process, and it happened the way that it did. And I'm actually so glad it did, because I did my master's of divinity before I did my marriage and family therapy degree. And why that was so significant for me is because my theology background helps me to learn. It taught me how to unpack things, how to experience what it is to do theology on the margins, and helping to sort of deconstruct notions. And so as a clinician, the way that it helps me is I know how to ask the right questions. Because if you ask the wrong question, the answer that you get is almost irrelevant. Like, you have to know how to ask the right questions. And so that's part of how that integration works for me in terms of my approach, that I lean into that a lot. And particularly with individuals who have some sort of faith tradition, whatever that faith tradition is, I like to be very clear that if um, if they're coming into therapy and we're not talking about that, we're missing out on a significant piece of that individual's life.
Yeah.
You know, not because, and they don't have to be in church 5 days a week for that to be significant. Why? Because our faith traditions or our faith is part of our value system,
Yeah.
and our values impact our behaviors and our decisions and how we navigate through the world. So we're not talking about that. We're missing out on some of the things that influence individuals' lives. And then, of course, then there's that other caveat of the religious environments, not faith, the religious environments that have traumatized us in some ways.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that impact on our lives. So that's part of the integration. I feel very fortunate in my work that not only do I get to be a clinician to folks who come to see me directly, that I also get to supervise clinicians. And that is such an honor to me, more specifically because I know the challenge in having a therapist or a supervisor that looks like me, right? Who knows how to engage with communities who are marginalized in the therapy room, because that's very different than what we learn in school oftentimes. And so if we don't have people who can bridge that gap, and I feel fortunate to be able to help do that. And so that's part of the integration, that I do that as a clinician and also as a clinical supervisor.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm seeing people come in. Hey, Wadan. Hey, brother. How are you? My mama's on. Hey, Mom. And my daughter actually has a question. I'm going to make sure that we get to that question, Jasmine, I promise. So Reverend Olivia, you kind of talked a little bit about your process and a little bit about your process and some of your previous responses. And so I want to pivot a little bit to kind of talk about, to address leaders in ministry or so how do you believe leaders can address the unique challenges and concerns related to mental health in ministry or religious leadership roles?
Good question. Good question. If I can back up just slightly to say kind of how I think Dr. Bryant's point of your journey was really key. I kind of shared in our backstage conversation how I didn't sign up for this. So I was a women's leader. I'm a part of a pretty large church in my area, and I was leading this group of women. And basically, what happened was they were coming to me for stuff that couldn't be prayed away. Right. And so I was referring them, as Dr. Leah said, notice what's above your pay grade, right? So I was referring them, but the challenge that was happening for, that I could see was that they couldn't find people that looked like them. And so they spent time in the therapy room trying to help people understand their context. Mm-hmm. And then you're not able to show up as your full self because you're not understood. So now you're not understood over here in your regular day-to-day stuff. And now you're having to teach and or be invalidated because your experience doesn't match their understanding. And so here I am, I can remember when I was doing my internship, finishing up my LPC degree, I remember sitting with we were rounding. And so, we had the psychiatrist and the therapist, all of us were rounding and discussing our cases or what have you. And the topic of this woman came up, and long story short, they were in the process, they were basically saying that she didn't meet any of the criteria for the diagnoses, right? So I had the opportunity to have this conversation with her. And what I realized is she couldn't check off the boxes for major MDD, major depressive disorder, as a Black woman who was a single mom, single income in her house. No, she didn't stay in the bed all day because the livelihood of her household depended on it, right? No, she wasn't missing meetings. No, she wasn't doing these things that the DSM said that she should be doing. Instead, it was showing up in other ways, the way that she was agitated and the way that she was, more aggressive than what was typical of her nature, the way that, her house was in chaos. She was normally very orderly, clean, and this, that, and the other, but so it was not until as Dr. Bryant said, we had to ask some different questions. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that is one of the things that I get to do in the therapeutic room, is learn how to ask the right questions and also give people the space to show up as their real authentic self. Mm-hmm. Black people make up less than 2 to 4% of all psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists in the US. 2 to 4%. Wow. That means it's not enough of us to serve the people. Mm-hmm. But when we show up, we have to be able to show up in the fullness of who we are. And then the other little last piece I just wanted to add is that the other part of the work that I get to do is I help people decolonize their faith, because there are some people who are bound in these spaces because they don't have the freedom to understand what the Bible really said, right? They are going by what was taught to them, what was passed on to them, and all of the things, right? So to give them the opportunity to speak their own truth and to walk in their own truth, like not what they said, but what do you believe this passage means? Or what do you believe about the character of God? What about this is helpful? Again, Dr. Liz's point, how is this narrative serving you? Right. Mm-hmm. And being able to give them the opportunity to find their own footing in their religious context. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. This is good. So, whenever I get that time, I always ask permission if we can go just a little bit over. Hope if everyone's fine with it. If anyone has to leave, it's okay. Okay. So we won't go, I promise, much over, because I'm not going to ask all of the questions. But I do want to make sure that I get this question in, and then we can close with any words of advice and final words of wisdom that each of you would have for our listeners today. So my daughter Jasmine, she says, how can you speak on your mental health without sounding like you're using it as a crutch? Some people say I use my mental health as a reason to act out, and I disagree. And she says that she would love to hear feedback from all of you. So we'll start with Dr. Liz, then Dr. Bryant, then Reverend Olivia.
Thanks. First off, Jasmine, it's a lot of courage to even ask that question. So just sitting in the awareness that you have a lot of courage, that you have a lot of power by deciding to be visible in this, and it's hard to do that. I think I would start with the digging in a little bit about as a crutch for what, right? Like, what exactly are you trying to prop up here? Because I think that the question, like, how do you navigate that, depends on what it is, right? So if you're saying, we'll take dyslexia for an example, right? If you're saying, I'm having a really hard time reading and I'm getting D's in my reading, class at school, and it's because I'm dyslexic, is that a crutch or is that a reason? And if that's a reason, how do we get you an actual, I don't want to call it a crutch, right? But how do we prop you up? Like, what is going on that helps you, right? What's the prosthetic that helps you move forward? And so I think I would start with the question of what is the crutch about? What are you propping yourself up in, right? Is it that I'm staying in bed all day because I have depression? Is it that I'm screaming at people because I have a lot of anxiety and it's coming out because I'm externalizing it at others? So what's showing up, and what are you trying to prop up right in that moment? And then asking others who love you and support you, say, this is how I feel and this is what I think is going on. Have you noticed anything with this? I'm not going to be defensive. I'm really trying to investigate this a little bit more so I can find some solutions, which is different than there's nothing wrong with me, whatever, which I'm not implying that you're doing, right? But coming to people that you love and saying, hey, I'm struggling here. What ideas do you have? Is this as bad as I think it is? Am I overblowing it here? But crutches are to cover up something that we're using in a way that harms us, right? Like, I'm self-medicating using, I'm abusing alcohol to self-medicate because I don't know how to relax after a really, really difficult day. My job is way too stressful, right? Alcohol is a crutch for addressing the unmanageability of a job and perhaps some underlying mental health issues that need to be addressed by a doctor. I think that that's very different than saying, I'm experiencing these symptoms and I need some help, right? So that's kind of my best take at it with having very limited information. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. Dr. Bryant?
And I agree with Dr. Liz. So much courage in being able to even ask that question, particularly in a public space.
Yes.
That's incredible. The courage is incredible. That's a gift and a skill all by itself, because it suggests that I'm not comfortable, but I'm still doing it. Because oftentimes we wait for the feeling of safety, or we wait for the feeling of comfort before we proceed. But courage is saying, I am uncomfortable, but I'm still here. I'm challenged, but I'm still here. I'm afraid, but I'm still raising my hand.
Yeah.
And that is so powerful in and of itself. And then in terms of understanding, one of my approaches is I like to kind of just pull back the layers. I'm a very feelings kind of therapist. Tell me what the feeling is. Tell me what it is, because I think it's important. The reason why that courage is so significant, because I think it's important to not shy away from the discomfort. We have to a part of our therapeutic space is creating a space that is safe enough to say and experience the things that are uncomfortable, even when it comes to, as Lady O talked about, challenging or saying some of those theological things that you were forbidden to say in a public space. And yes, so it might start off, we might see the anger. Like when people talk about anger management, that term is a little problematic for me, because we're really not talking about anger management. We're talking about behavior management is what we're really talking about. The anger is not a problem. Anger is a feeling, just like happiness, just like sadness, just like joy, excitement. It's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So anger doesn't do anything itself. It is my actions when I'm angry that's problematic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so we understand, all right, I'm angry. What is it that's caused it? What's I'm angry? Because they're talking about me. Why are they talking about me? Because I don't get the problems right. I can't read out loud, and I'm piggybacking off Dr. Liz's dyslexia challenge in school. Because they're talking about me when I don't read. How does that make you feel? It feels like I am by myself. I'm isolated, and we kind of just go down like and we find out from that feeling of being angry. Like I punched the student, but I punched them because I really feel like I'm unsafe in the classroom because I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand my
Mm-hmm.
feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different conversation. And so then we can do the testing that we need to do to understand, okay, this child does not have an anger problem or even a behavioral problem. There's an academic challenge that we need to bring attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of be able to pull back the layers and to your point, Lady O, to ask the right questions, particularly the ones that are culturally sensitive or require cultural awareness,
Mm-hmm.
because these mental illness, and Dr. Liz mentioned as well, it's impacted differently. It looks different in different communities. And
Yeah.
we can't, as clinicians, we can't shy away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what has already been said by my other two colleagues, so I won't echo. Aside from kudos, Jazz, you got it going on, even if you don't even realize it. The
Mm-hmm.
only other piece I want to just, I guess, raise to our awareness is that people often reject that which they don't understand. People often reject that which they don't understand and or are afraid of, right? And so when you stand up and show up in the fullness of who you are, Jazz, you are making some people uncomfortable. And so they are rejecting you because of their stuff. And so if you don't remember, anything else I said in this piece, please remember that that's their stuff and not yours. Keep showing up in the fullness of who you are, asking for what you need, and taking up all the space. Take up the space.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little emotional. Thank you, each of you, for holding space for her. I know she said I'm about to cry. And I was like, don't do that, because I'll be crying and booing on this program today. So thank you so much for pivoting away from leadership. Well, she is a leader in her own right, and I always, I always say that to her. She says thank you so much,
But
and that she appreciates everyone.
Can I just respond to you said us taking us providing space for her? Mm-hmm. She requested space and we obliged her.
Yeah.
She requested, that was her.
Yeah.
She did that work. We responded to it. But she was the one who requested space and said, I need to take it up for myself without apology. And that's what's incredible about it.
Yeah. Thank you again. So as we move to close, what is one key takeaway or what of advice or a piece of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with today? And we'll start with Reverend Olivia, then Dr. Bryant, then Dr. Liz.
I would leave our friends and kindred with this. Continue to take up space and show up for your, Jazz has really, modeled for us what it looks like to show up as our full authentic self unapologetically, right? And so as a leader, remember that you are not alone. You're not the only one that's dealing with this and this and that, even though those are the lies or the tricks that our mind plays on us. Isolation is a trick of the enemy and I mean enemy in layers. We think about that, in the faith context as well as, the secular context, right? Isolation is one of the key, tricks that has us thinking that we are alone and that we cannot get the support that we need. And what I know personally is that when I take care of myself first, when I prioritize my mental health and my physical wellness, I'm not only better for me, I'm better for my family. I can show up as a wife, as a mom, and a grandmother in ways that I can't otherwise. I show up for my clients, for my congregation, and my community in ways that I can't otherwise. So, like the stewardess tells us, the flight attendants tells us, put the mask on your face first. Take care of yourself first. Center your own needs first. And allow everything else to flow out from the inside out from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Reverend Olivia. Dr. Bryant?
I think Jazz modeled it for us. I think, like, I'm with you, Lady O. Jazz modeled the very thing that we're talking about today. And I think it was just a perfect example. But I guess if I would leave something, one of the things that came to mind as we were in discussion was our trauma responses. I think it's so important to be able to name and identify our traumas. Trauma on the spectrum, no stigma, because we've all had it. And the reason why I think it's important to be able to name it is because our trauma result in trauma responses. And oftentimes we have we misidentify ourselves through our trauma responses. We say, kind of like that whole what goes on in this house stays in this house. That's a trauma response, yes. Right? And if we don't understand the trauma, we are not able to ask the question, is it still necessary? Because the trauma response is what we've done, not necessarily who we are. And we have mislabeled ourselves by our trauma responses. And because our trauma didn't give us enough time to even figure out who we were, because we were dealing with it so early oftentimes. And so I think it's important to be able to kind of trace back and give yourselves permission and the grace to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Dr. Liz.
Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. I like to be really, really granular and practical. I love the feelings and all of digging into trauma and permission. Yes, 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 yes. And as a coach, my job is to give people let's develop a recipe. Here's the steps that you're going to mix up in your own life to help you deprogram and then reprogram in a way that really works for you. And in the service of that, I want to kind of give kind of final thoughts to leaders and then final thoughts to coaches and therapists in terms of two specific things that I think are really, really, really important components of how to address a lot of the different issues that we've been talking about. So first, to leaders, you don't have to share with everyone what's going on. Mm-hmm. You don't. And if you choose to, right, Jazz shared a bit of her story. I've shared a bit of my story. You can be selective in what you say, right? My mental health, everybody, it's a whole elephant, right? We all got a whole elephant. I just share the bushy tail because I feel called, in my faith tradition, I feel called to share because I know it's a testimony to other people to find healing, right? That does not mean I share the whole elephant every single freaking day, right? So you don't have to share with everyone and you don't have to share everything. I know we live in an age of commodified vulnerability where you scroll on Facebook and people are sharing really, really intense personal information, some of which I would say kind of veers into mandated reporter, red alarm going off, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. People are, of course, empowered and welcome to share whatever they feel necessary. But know that for you to find resources does not mean that you also have to share everything. And you certainly don't have to share it with everyone. You can find a trusted mentor, a trusted colleague. And within that, you don't owe anyone an apology, right? You just don't. You don't have to apologize for the symptoms of an illness. You don't have to apologize for trauma responses that are coming out in a way. You can just say, I'm so sorry that I did that. I lost my temper. You didn't deserve that. I take full responsibility. You don't have to say, and it happened because XYZ. You get to disclose your story as you see fit. No one is entitled to it. That's your choice. And then to coaches and therapists, what I want to say really explicitly is it is incumbent upon you to have people in your network that you can refer out to when you're above your pay grade. Period. The end. You need to spend some time finding clinicians who specialize in different trauma and finding psychiatrists that you think are really good to refer to, right? Maybe you can find some referrals through other colleagues, whatever. But for me, one of the most important things that I do for people is I identify like, whoop, above my pay grade here, this is what I think could be going on. And here is the doctor I'd really like to encourage you to see, right? And sometimes I do make continuing to work with me contingent on that, right? I can't continue to see you unless you have been screened for this thing, because in full ethics, in full integrity, I can't help you until we address this component, right? And I think that there's a lot of financial incentives in the coaching world to try to do it all yourself, right? Especially high ticket coaching. We want to do it all. That's not ethical. You're not in integrity if you're choosing to try to take on things regarding mental illness that are best left to a psychiatrist. You need to take some time, have some humility, build your network. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. We can say that very same thing to some of these pastors and and spiritual counselors out there that do not refer. And then the individuals that are coming to them for care are left worse off because their spiritual guide, their minister, their pastor, their bishop does not know how to refer outside of themselves. That is a whole other conversation that we will not. I'll take another hour or two to try to unpack that a little bit. But thank you so much, each of you, again, for being here. Reverend Olivia, how can the people find you on social media? Oh, you're muted.
Just in case I mute so that if I'm over here smacking or something on gun or what have you, y'all don't hear me. But I am oliviatate.com across all social media and my website. And then I also have @WellBlackWoman across all social media as well. So I'd love to connect.
And the second one was @WellBlackWoman?
Well Black Woman.
Well Black Woman. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Bryant, where can the people find you?
Dr._Woodford. That's 4D. That's my Instagram, which also has my the link in my bio.
Okay. And Dr. Liz, where can the folk find you?
I'm just @Soul Dr. Liz, SOULDRLIZ. That is on Instagram as well as Facebook. Facebook and Instagram are kind of where I hang out the most. And then you can also find me on my website, which is just souldrliz.com/home.
Thank you. Thank you all again for engaging with us today for this powerful conversation. I wish we had even more time to unpack some stuff, but what you've left us with today will resonate. I know it will resonate with me, and I will definitely go back and rewatch this because there was healing in this broadcast today for me, and healing for my daughter, and all of those who are watching. And we'll catch this in the replay. So thank you once again. Please let us know what's coming up with each of you. There's a book or anything that we can help promote for you. Let us know about it. We'll be sure to do it. And I hope to have each of you back on, maybe, as not in the panel, but as a singular host in the future. So thank you all again. And I want you to have a good rest of the day and a good rest of your week.
Thank you,
so
Sue.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Nice meeting you, Dr. Liz and Dr. Bryant. It has been a pleasure.
As well.
Thank you.
And as we are getting ready to get out of here, but I want to make sure that you join us next week. We will have Reverend Dr. Marilyn Pagan Banks. She's the Executive Director of A Just Harvest. It is their 40th anniversary celebration coming up next Sunday. And we are going to talk with Reverend with Dr. Marilyn about all of the wonderful work that she does with A Just Harvest. Thank you all again for joining me today, for joining our guests today. I pray that this was edifying for you. I pray that it was healing, and that you leave this discussion today a little differently. I see all of the guests that came in, all of my sisters and brothers in blood and in spirit were on today, and I appreciate you for it. Remember, keep sharing. Just share it. Still share it out, even though the broadcast is ended, because somebody needs to hear what was stated today. Somebody needs to hear what was stated today. Okay, we'll get out of here. Until next time, you know what I always say, I want you to stay uplifted. I want you to stay motivated. But most of all, I want you to stay inspired. I can't wait to see you again next week. Now, if I can find my outro. What you saying? Listen, it's not exact science, y'all. Thank you for watching. I will see you next.